Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the far reaches of the galaxy, where countless civilizations competed for dominance, a new kind of battlefield had emerged, one where no weapons were wielded, no blood was spilled, and no lives were lost. It was the annual Galactic Virtual Warfare Competition, a test of the mind, of strategy, and of teamwork. And though it lacked the physical stakes of traditional wars, the consequences of victory or defeat resonated throughout the cosmos. For centuries, this competition had been dominated by the most advanced species. The Zygarth, with their near-perfect AI systems, had claimed the championship for the past decade. The Ligrians, a race of telepaths with unrivaled coordination, were perennial contenders. The Kryn, with their cybernetically enhanced minds, had never failed to place in the top 3. In this arena of titans, humanity was little more than a footnote. Earth had only recently been granted entry into the competition, seen by the galactic elite as a courtesy rather than a legitimate contender. To the other species, humans were primitive, barely scraping by with their fledgling technology. Earth's team, hastily assembled and lacking the resources of its competitors, was given no chance at all. They were the underdogs, doomed to be eliminated in the early rounds like so many before them, but Captain Ryan Mercer saw things differently. A veteran gamer who had spent his entire life immersed in virtual reality simulations, he understood the true nature of the competition. It wasn't just about raw power or technology. It was about understanding the game itself. And Ryan believed that humanity's greatest strength lay in its adaptability, creativity, and, most importantly, its ability to work together when the odds were stacked against them. As Ryan stood before his team in the dimly lit command room, the tension was palpable. His team, 5 individuals who had never met before joining the competition, sat around a holographic display, watching replays of the previous year's final match. The Zygarth had annihilated their opponents with surgical precision, their AI-driven strategies too complex for even the telepathic Ligrians to counter. "Look at that," one of his teammates, Elena, muttered, shaking her head. "We don't stand a chance against that kind of coordination." Ryan remained silent, his sharp blue eyes focused on the screen. He wasn't watching the Zygarth's flawless execution of tactics. He was searching for something else, anything they could exploit. After a long moment, he turned off the display and faced his team. "They're beatable," Ryan said, his voice calm but firm. His words hung in the air, met with skeptical looks from his teammates. Lucas, the team's tech specialist, scoffed. "You're kidding, right? You saw what they did last year. There wasn't a single mistake in their entire strategy." "That's the problem," Ryan replied. "They don't make mistakes because they rely on the AI to control their every move. Everything is calculated down to the smallest detail." Elena frowned, crossing her arms. "And how is that a problem? Sounds like an advantage to me." "It is, if you play the game the way it's meant to be played," Ryan said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "But what if we don't? What if we stop thinking like them, stop trying to out-tech them, and start using the one thing they can't calculate?" "And what's that?" Lucas asked, raising an eyebrow. Ryan's smile widened. "Creativity." For a moment, no one spoke. The idea seemed absurd. How could creativity outmatch technology that could calculate billions of possibilities in a split second? But Ryan had seen it before, in games back on Earth. The best players weren't the ones with the best equipment or the highest stats, they were the ones who thought outside the box, who exploited the mechanics of the game itself to gain an advantage. "Think about it," Ryan continued. "The Zygarth's AI is perfect, but it's also predictable. It follows the rules because that's what it's designed to do. It doesn't account for variables that fall outside of its parameters. But we can. We can manipulate the environment, bend the rules, and force them into situations they're not prepared for. Elena glanced at the others, doubt still evident in her expression. That's a big risk. If we mess up, we're done. We're already the underdogs, Ryan said. No one expects us to make it past the first round. So what do we have to lose? Slowly, the tension in the room began to shift. The skepticism faded, replaced by a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Ryan was onto something. They had no chance of outgunning or out-teching their opponents, but if they could outsmart them, it was a long shot, but it was a shot worth taking. The first round of the competition began as expected. The human team, representing Earth for the first time, was paired against the Nauruthians, a species known for their mastery of real-time simulations. The Nauruthians had little respect for humans, and the match was expected to be a quick, decisive victory. The virtual battlefield materialized around Ryan and his team, a sprawling, war-torn cityscape filled with towering skyscrapers and crumbling infrastructure. The Nauruthians took to the skies immediately, their hovercrafts zipping through the air with precision. They deployed drones to sweep the area for the human team, expecting to flush them out and eliminate them swiftly. Stick to the plan, Ryan's voice crackled in the comms. His team was hidden deep within the ruins of a collapsed building, shields activated to mask their presence from the drones. They watched the Nauruthians scour the city, unaware of the trap that had been set. Ryan had chosen the battlefield deliberately, knowing the Nauruthians would rely on aerial dominance. But he had spotted a flaw in their strategy, one the AI-driven opponents couldn't account for. The Nauruthians didn't expect their enemies to use the environment against them. As the Nauruthians descended lower, scanning the streets for any sign of movement, Ryan gave the signal. Lucas, the tech specialist, activated a series of pre-planted electromagnetic pulses, shutting down the drone surveillance systems. In the same instant, Elena and the others unleashed a barrage of explosives, bringing down entire sections of the city onto the Nauruthian hovercrafts. The Nauruthians scrambled to react, but it was too late. The debris buried their vehicles, cutting off their mobility and leaving them vulnerable. In a matter of minutes, the human team had wiped out their opponents. It wasn't a clean victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the virtual battlefield dissolved and the match ended, the crowd watching from across the galaxy was stunned. The underdog humans had won their first match. But the real shock came from how they had done it, using the environment in ways the AI-driven strategies hadn't predicted. The next rounds followed a similar pattern. The human team, led by Ryan's unconventional tactics, continued to defy expectations. They weren't the fastest or the strongest, but they were the most adaptable. They exploited every quirk in the game mechanics, bending the rules to their advantage in ways no other species had thought to do. Each victory brought more attention, more scrutiny, and more respect from their competitors. By the time they reached the semi-finals, the human team had earned a small but passionate following. Galactic pundits debated their success, some attributing it to luck, others to sheer ingenuity. But there was no denying that the humans had become the wild card in the competition. Their semi-final match was against the Kryn, the cybernetically enhanced species that had always placed in the top 3. The Kryn were cold, calculating, and utterly relentless in their approach to the game. Their augmented minds allowed them to process data at a rate no organic brain could match, and they had never lost to an opponent with inferior technology. The virtual battlefield for this match was a maze of narrow corridors and vertical shafts, a labyrinthine industrial complex where every corner could hide danger. The Kryn's strategy was simple: overwhelm the human team with sheer speed and precision, giving them no time to react, but Ryan had prepared for this. He knew the Kryn would rely on their speed, so he devised a counter-strategy, one that played to the human team's strengths. "We're not going to fight them head-on," Ryan said in the briefing before the match. "They're faster, stronger, and better equipped. But they're also predictable. They'll expect us to run, to try and outmaneuver them. So that's exactly what we'll do, but on our terms." The match began, and the Kryn launched their assault. The human team scattered, moving through the maze of corridors, evading the Kryn's relentless pursuit. But every step of their retreat was carefully planned. Lucas hacked into the complex's systems, opening and closing doors, rerouting power, and creating choke points. Elena laid traps, explosives rigged to go off at just the right moment. The Kryn, confident in their superiority, fell into the trap. As they pursued the humans through the labyrinth, they found themselves caught in a series of ambushes. Their speed and precision turned against them. One by one, their units were picked off, until only a handful remained. In the final moments of the match, the Kryn realized too late that they had been outsmarted. Ryan and his team, hidden in the shadows, struck the final blow, securing their place in the championship match. The final match of the Galactic Virtual Warfare competition was the event of the century. The human team, once dismissed as a joke, was now the last contender standing against the reigning champions, the Zygarth. The Zygarth had dominated the competition for a decade, their AI-driven tactics flawless and their strategies unmatched. No one had ever come close to defeating them. The virtual battlefield for the final match was unlike any the human team had faced before. It was a vast, alien landscape, constantly shifting and changing as the environment adapted to the players' actions. The Zygarth's AI was designed for such complexity, able to process the constant flux and adjust its strategy in real time. For the human team, it was a nightmare scenario, but Ryan wasn't fazed. He had spent the days leading up to the match studying the Zygarth's tactics, analyzing every minute detail of their previous matches. He knew the AI would adapt to any conventional strategy they tried, so he devised something unconventional, something no AI could predict. As the match began, the human team moved cautiously through the shifting landscape, watching as the Zygarth's forces advanced with mechanical precision. The Zygarth didn't waste time. They deployed their units strategically, pressing the humans into a corner where they could be easily overwhelmed. But Ryan had anticipated this. Instead of retreating, he had his team hold their ground, using the terrain's shifting nature to create barriers between themselves and the Zygarth. Lucas hacked into the environment itself, destabilizing the virtual landscape and creating pockets of instability that the Zygarth couldn't predict. It was a risky move. The AI adapted quickly, but it wasn't fast enough to keep up with the human team's erratic, unpredictable tactics. Ryan had his team split up, drawing the Zygarth forces into a dozen different engagements at once, forcing the AI to divide its attention. Every time the Zygarth adapted, the human team shifted their approach, exploiting weaknesses in the AI's calculations. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the Zygarth had never faced an opponent like this. Their AI was designed to counter logic and strategy, but it couldn't account for the sheer unpredictability of human creativity. Ryan and his team pressed their advantage, pushing the Zygarth back until, finally, they had them cornered. In the final moments of the match, Ryan made the call. Using a series of hacks and exploits they had discovered earlier in the competition, the human team triggered a chain reaction in the virtual environment, destabilizing the entire battlefield. The Zygarth's AI, overwhelmed by the chaos, couldn't react in time. The match ended in a brilliant flash of light as the Zygarth's forces were wiped out, leaving the human team victorious. The galaxy was in shock. Humanity, the species once considered the weakest in the competition, had just defeated the reigning champions. Ryan and his team were hailed as heroes, their victory proving that human creativity, adaptability, and teamwork were forces to be reckoned with. As Ryan stood before the cameras, reporters from across the galaxy clamoring for interviews, he smiled. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We've only scratched the surface of what humanity can do. We may not have the best technology, but we have something no AI can replicate, the power to think outside the box." And with that, the human race had earned its place in the galaxy, not as underdogs, but as champions.